from TPS, and when conditions are right, it's going to command an upshift to second. To do that, it's going to what? What's it going to do to the solenoids? Here's our 1-2 shift valve in the downshifted position, D4 fluid sitting there waiting. The 1-2 shift solenoid is energized, so signal fluid pressure is high enough to hold the valve over against spring pressure. So to shift into second, we need to do what?
De-energize 1-2.
Absolutely. We're going to de-energize the 1-2. So if you go over to take a look at second gear, and it's helpful to bounce back and forth between these pages to see what's different, see what changed. So when we de-energized the 1-2 shift solenoid, that allowed the signal fluid to exhaust, which allowed spring pressure to push the 1-2 shift valve over into the upshifted position, allowing D4 fluid to feed into the second fluid passage. Second fluid went down to a 2-3 shift valve where it's going down to the servo feed, but it's really not doing anything right now. So we'll bypass that. It goes over to the 3-4 relay where it's just getting ready for some future events. And then it goes over to our number 8 check ball and our 3-2 downshift valve, where again it's just getting ready for some future events at the downshift valve. At number 8 check ball, it's going to seat it, forcing it through number 16 orifice, and from there it's going to go down to our 1-2 accumulator and our 2-4 band to apply the band. So we talked about how the accumulator works. You guys remember that? As we stroke the accumulator piston, we're stroking it against this fluid here, accumulator fluid. That accumulator fluid goes where? We're making
Accumulator valve?
Yeah, it goes up to the accumulator valve. Notice that it's acting on this side of that accumulator valve, pushing it over against the torque signal fluid pressure and spring pressure. Is it pushing it over against D4? No. D4 is just there to supply the fluid. It's not really pushing against it. It's kind of moving within it, but D4 is not positioning the valve. Only torque signal is and accumulator fluid is. Get out of here. What's that sign coming up for? Ah, man. So accumulator fluid is pushing the valve over, allowing accumulator fluid to exhaust at that exhaust valve past the accumulator land for our 1-2 upshift. Now if I stepped on the throttle, what would happen to torque signal fluid pressure?
Up.
And if it goes up, what does that do to this valve?
Pushes it back.
And what does that do to the ability for accumulator fluid to exhaust? Shuts it off, right? So that means that the accumulator fluid down here in the accumulator is high, which means the supply pressure reaches that critical apply pressure quicker, which means it applies the band, right? So I'm going to ask you about something. You tell me what you think. I'm driving a vehicle with 4L60E. I drive out of the school up to 106, getting ready to pull out. And I look both ways, and I can make it, and I step on it, and then I realize that car's too close, so I let up off it, the car goes by, and then I step on it some more. Now, when I stepped on it to pull out, what happened to my torque signal fluid pressure?
Went up.
What happened to my accumulator valve? Got pushed over?
Pressure went up.
So now this accumulator fluid can't exhaust, so I've got I've reached my apply pressure much quicker. The car goes by, then I lightly accelerate out, and it shifts into second. What kind of shift am I going to have? Because it didn't have a chance to get back to those low pressures. That's exactly what happens to a lot of customers when they come into you complaining about a harsh 1-2 shift on this transmission. They stepped on it to pull out, so they raised our line pressure because they were going to pull out real quickly, and then they let up off on it, the car goes by, and then they step gradually because now they don't have to hurry, but the pressure's already all high. So we slam the band into the applied position without the load being applied, so it feels like a harsh shift. That's something to keep in mind. Because sometimes, just the way the customer drives causes these reactions, and it's nothing wrong with the transmission, it's working the way it's supposed to. any questions on our 1-2 upshift? Your half page explains everything out to you. So if you ever have a question about, why is that valve there? What's happening there? It will tell you why they routed fluid there. Sometimes it's just to get ready for an upshift. Sometimes it's just a shared passage that is going to be used later on for exhaust. And that is the case in this transmission. We do that. So it's not really serving any function in this particular shift. It's just a consequence of the passage being there. To shift into second, what pushed the valve into the upshifted position?
Accumulator fluid?
Now look at your 1-2 shift valve. Look at it in first. Look at it in second. To make the upshift, what moved the valve? What pressure moves the valve?
G4 fluid?
No, D4 fluid is being shuttled by the valve. Not really. Well, the 1-2 signal fluid pressure dropped, but that's not what actually moves the valve. What moves the valve? Spring pressure. That's all. Yeah, once you de-energize the 1-2 fluid pressure, spring pressure pushed it over, which means, that spring is not real strong, guys. So if you have a little burr on that valve, it's not going to upshift, or it may upshift sluggishly. So it's important that these valves be in good condition. The lands don't have any scratches on them. So when you're taking them out, you really do have to be careful about how you take them out. Because if you damage them, then you're going to affect the shift. And if you damage the valve, you're replacing the valve body, because you can't buy individual valves for these. So to shift into third gear, we